So, hello and a very warm welcome to this Made in Britain and British Design Fund session. It's titled Meet the Makers. So just a few words of housekeeping before we set off. This dialogue today is all about British design and manufacturing. If that's not what you're expecting to hear about, you might be in the wrong digital room, but you're very welcome to stay if that's the case, because we do welcome all voices. We're here to learn. There will be plenty of time for questions and interactions with our guest speakers. If you have a question or a comment, please do let us all know what your name is, your area of interest, whether you're a designer, a manufacturer, an investor, or none of those. All the voices are welcome, as I said. We have this room booked for 60 minutes. If we do run out of time, which may well happen, we can all gather together, follow up later on all the usual channels, LinkedIn. I'll put my details in a minute. There's Twitter, of course, for communicating to mass audiences, and then there's email as well. We can all keep in touch via the normal channels. So first things first, I better let you know who I am. My name is John Pearce. I'm the Chief Executive at Made in Britain. We are the official body that licenses the famous Made in Britain mark to some 2,000 British manufacturing businesses across 50 product sectors, helping them to sell more here in the UK and abroad. The value of the membership group to the UK economy has recently been measured by some very clever people at Manchester Metropolitan University, the Future Economics Department, and they think the value of our group is currently £3.5 billion, which is an important piece of the jigsaw puzzle of the British economy in the future. Design is absolutely vital to British manufacturing. It's fundamental to the success of Made in Britain as an organisation. Our collective mark is official. It was registered with the UK's Intellectual Property Office and was very carefully designed to be fit for purpose after months of research into what was required to unify all of Britain's thriving and growing manufacturing businesses. And it worked. Designing something to be fit for purpose makes a difference between failure and success. So with that in mind, I'm delighted to introduce you to somebody who has worked on the cutting edge of British design for, John, 40 years. Is that all right?
Something like that.
Chairman of the British Design Fund and former CEO of the Design Council, John Mathers. You don't have to be called John to present these things, but it does help. John, if you could please tell us a little bit more about your passion for design and introduce us to our very special invited guests, Samantha and Adam.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Before we started, John and I were just catching up, and the last time we physically met was in the toilets at the Design Council.
A chance encounter.
Well, I won't necessarily go into that in any great detail, but it is a really interesting thinking back to the Design Council and the links that the Design Council has with Made in Britain, because the provenance of the Design Council was back in 1944 when Winston Churchill set up the Design Council, and he set the Design Council up with the specific intention of ensuring that good design was at the very heart of British manufacturing. And it was his forward thinking about making sure that when the war was over, British manufacturing was in good shape and was very strong in an international perspective as well. So it's quite funny when you think back about it that we're actually so close. And the British Design Fund that had its origins in the Design Council. Back in the day, we ran a program called Spark, which was a very early stage accelerator where young entrepreneurs could come to us with really quite basic ideas, and then we'd help them go through a process where they were able to find funding at the end of that 20-week stage of work. And it was actually a colleague and I, Damon, who's the chief exec of the Design Fund, who were frustrated that we could find so many people who were interested in technology, but really struggled to find funding for really brilliant product ideas. And it was at that point 5 or 6 years ago, that we set up the British Design Fund in a way, sensing that there seems to be a gap in the market. Let's see whether there's a market in the gap. And 4 funds later, it certainly seems that way. We're now we've just launched our 5th fund. We're looking at a Scottish design fund specifically. And we're also looking at a growth fund, which we'll probably look at next year, which will be about supporting follow-on businesses. The thinking behind the British Design Fund is we invest in well-designed, purpose-led products and services, and it's really important that that we not only give the enterprises money, but we support them with mentoring. So often we find it's the mentoring that makes as much difference as the money. And I think, it feels a really interesting time. Now feels like the time for British manufacturing to come to the fore, with technology being challenged in so many ways. And I think we're very pleased and proud to be associated with Made in Britain at this time. So without further ado, we've got over the last 4 or 5 years, we've invested in well over 20 products. And if you have a look at the website, you'll see the huge variety and range of products and services that we've invested in. But I'm delighted that we've got 2 West Country investees with us. First of all, Sam Jackman, who runs Boost, and she'll tell you all about it, but it's, it came from, and Sam, in fact, was one of our very early Spark participants. So Sam and I go way back. And Sam believed that breast forms don't need to have to be beige. And I'm looking forward to hearing, well, I'm sure you all are, from Sam, who has a company that believes that has values that include shape, confidence, comfort, joy, choice, and style. Pretty impressive. And then I'm going to hand you, after Sam, to Adam Root from Bristol-based Matter. And Matter is an innovation company pioneering technology solutions for capturing, harvesting, and recycling microplastics. What's that, you might ask? Well, Adam is going to tell you all about it. So without further ado, Sam, ladies first.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you all today. And yes, I was one of those first people on a Spark program with a very basic idea. We didn't have any product designs. We had no CAD. We just knew that there needed to be change. And as is usual with me, I have some things to show you, because I do a lot of show and tell, just to explain a little bit more about the background of our company and why we felt the need that good design principles needed to be incorporated into this type of product. So my mum had a breast cancer diagnosis and she was given a breast prosthesis. And traditional breast prosthesis, the market norm is something that looks a bit like this, which is why John mentioned the beige colour. They tend to be beige. So these prostheses are designed to replace the flesh of the breast. They mirror the weight of the breast. And in theory, that should be quite good. But in practice, it's actually quite difficult for breast form wearers to wear something like this all the time. They are really heavy. They can make you sweat. They're hot and uncomfortable. And based on my mum's experience, we had a look at what might be a design-led solution to some of those problems. And I did some work with the Spark program, which is where we actually formed, we developed a 3D printed prototype at the very beginning to show the concept. And now we have moved on. So our manufacturing is based in Cornwall, and we make these. You can see I'm matching today with my top. This is a Boost breast form, which is a different structure and a different type of product. It's silicon molded. It is a single mold. And importantly, because we make them here in Cornwall, and we made that decision to make them here in Cornwall in a small batch production process, which is scalable, but it's not actually a drain on resources. So as we're growing, our production can grow with us, which means we're not overproducing. We can manage our silicon waste effectively, so we're not causing a detrimental impact to the environment. And these breast forms have been designed to be recyclable themselves. So again, that can come back and we can remanufacture the silicone into something else if the product gets to the end of its life. So we've been developing these for a few years. They are now selling rather well with our customers. We've got a lot of people who are genuinely interested. We've started talking again recently to the NHS about supplying them there. And we're really proud of how they've come out. As John said, we don't make them in skin color. We don't make them in beige. We make them in inclusive, feel-good colors, because we found that particularly for women of color, it's really difficult for them to find appropriate skin tone products. And the skin tones of diverse groups around the world really vary. So we've gone for a different type of design decision, but all of this has come about through some of the support that we've had right at the beginning from Spark, and then moved on into the British Design Fund, where we still access quite a lot of the mentoring support, particularly now that we're looking to scale. We're looking at whether we can supply bigger volumes and all of those things. So it's actually a really good and timely place for me to be right now, where we're on that cusp of growth. So I just I thought it would be good to show you the products rather than just talking about them, so you can see the difference in design here. So yeah, cool. Okay. Is there anything else that I need to cover? What would you like me to? So that's a little introduction to me. I guess I should hand over to Adam.
Well, actually, Sam, before you do that, just tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about how you made your mind up about where to manufacture and why you ultimately chose to manufacture in Cornwall.
Oh, John, that's an easy one because I live here and I love it. So I am very lucky that I am Cornish, and I have been. I live in the same village that I was born in, and I was brought up here. And it's always been a passion for me, as we've been growing the company, to give something back to the community that I live and work in. And I wanted to make sure that as we were growing, we were creating jobs for people in our community that were well paid, that were high skilled, and we were giving something back. So that was one of the reasons why we looked at manufacturing in the way we did, to keep that in our communities, and also to have that level of control and understanding about it because of that environmental sustainability element. That was really important to us. So the biggest solution really was to look at ways that we could develop our own manufacturing systems. And obviously, as a small business, we can't go straight into massive injection molding machines and all those kind of things. We didn't need to. We developed our own batch manufacturing process. We've worked with machinery providers who are also in Cornwall to try and understand more about the smallest types of machinery we could use for our molding processes. And we've developed a system which we call a production pod. Now, the advantage of the production pod is that as we grow, we can just add more pods, which makes things a lot easier. But it also means that if we were working with an organization abroad, perhaps we've been working with a charity in Nigeria, just as an example, we could in the future provide them with a production pod, in which case they could make their own kind of breast forms under a licensing agreement, where they could be in charge of their own color palettes, they could be in charge of their own volumes of production. And again, we're not mass manufacturing, we are manufacturing by batch. We're manufacturing what we need when we need it for the women that we're serving in terms of what they need in terms of their product. I just saw that there's questions in the thing. Somebody shout at me if there's questions that are specifically for me.
I tell you what, Sam, why don't we ask Adam to maybe
Yes.
to tell us about Matter, and then we'll come round and we'll do questions at the end. Is that okay, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's
Sounds
fine.
good. Yeah, it's hard to talk and read the questions at the same time. Sorry.
So Adam.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sam. It's great to hear that, and also John. And John, thanks for the intro. So you probably gathered by now, my name's Adam Roots. I'm the founder and CEO of Matter. So Matter is a microplastic technology company, and what that means is that we focus on the capture, harvest, and the recycling of micropollution. Specifically, what we work on a lot, for those who don't know about micropollution, one of the largest sources is synthetic textiles. So around 60% of all the fabrics made are from plastic derivatives, and they are effectively entering our water, our air, and our food. And we're seeing a huge amount of pressure that's happening from a legislation perspective, as well as consumer awareness. This is being driven by three major parts. We effectively have ingestion as being a big challenge as this material enters some of the organisms that are eating this are things like phytoplankton and zooplankton. These organisms are representing around 60% of all the oxygen produced on planet Earth. And they also sequester more carbon than all the plants and trees on Earth combined. So effectively, this is like the life support system of planet Earth in our oceans, and it's being stifled by the chemical pollution that we're putting into the water, and also it being attached to the micropollution. That also has the knock-on effect of the human health element, which is really a process of being understood. So there are some direct links between microplastic, chemical pollution, and human health. And myself and a few organizations around the world are helping to lead that charge. In regard to what do we actually do, maybe it's worth explaining a little bit about kind of one particular example. So from 2025, it will be illegal to buy a washing machine in parts of Europe without a microplastic filter. And you might go, okay, how do we go from washing machines to microplastic? This is how much microplastic comes out of a domestic washing machine every single year. So this is a green, there's some green microfibers in here, and it gives you an example about how much is coming out of your house every year. Some of the research has kind of been talked about with the politicians, and effectively they understand that this is such a large problem that cannot be solved at scale from wastewater treatment plants as it currently is. And we see the inside of a washing machine acting like a cheese grater, just the same way as you have a tumble dryer lint, you extract out your tumble dryer, all of that is in exactly the same position a washing machine. It's a lot more challenging to remove than a tumble dryer filter. So myself and my team have been working for the last few years, and we've been working on what we refer to as a platform technology. So the technology we developed can capture material down to about a micron in size, so it's very, very small particle size, and that's small enough that you could breathe that in, it would go through your lungs and it would enter your blood. So we've got a really small high efficiency system, but it uses low energy and low pressure consumption. And we've proven that we can scale it into a washing machine solution, which we have our first product that we're releasing now, which is Gulp. So this is the world's first retrofit washing machine filter with no disposable parts. And as you probably guessed, we'll be manufacturing this in the UK. So we're working with a partner based in Birmingham to produce this. We've also integrated that technology inside washing machines. So we have a partner, we have a number of partners that represent a big chunk of Europe's production of washing machines. And we've also proven that we can scale. So this unit behind me is 1 million litres of water a day. So that deals with textiles factories, wastewater treatment plants, looking at production facilities in that respect. So we have quite a diverse product groups, and I'm based here in Bristol in our 50,000 square foot office over here, where the guys are in-house designing things, making things, and developing solutions for our customers. That's a whistle-stop tour of matter, I suppose, John.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Tell me why, I mean, this is obviously a Made in Britain webinar. Why choose to make things in the UK?
Yeah, sure. I think there are a number of different reasons, and I suppose it's probably worth mentioning a little bit about my background. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and I started this company from a £250 Will It Work grant from the Prince's Trust. It's a very organic place to start. I didn't have any magic people behind me offering me cash from friends and family, and I built this business from the ground up. Obviously, we've got support of the British Design Fund and a number of partners that have come along the way, but I'm an engineer who's been I worked at Dyson for 5 years. I think they're one of the best product design companies on the planet, and the way that they produce, I think the heritage that that the UK has is often overlooked. I think we play it down often. You think of all made in Germany, yeah, that must be great, or there's a product over here that's made in Japan, it must have this brand. But actually, the UK brand is very, I worked on Japanese products when I was at Dyson, and owning a Dyson product is like owning a Rolex. They will take it apart, put it in a dishwasher, put it back together again, and put it on a shelf. It's a very premium product, and I think firstly there's a great opportunity there to utilize that. And I think the second part as well for me is we're producing sustainable products. I don't want our products being made in a way that's unethical. It's incredibly important for me about the full supply chain. So the foundational piece of this business, what was referred to cradle to cradle, and the cradle to cradle design principles, in a nutshell, is effectively thinking about how we make products and also the end of life of those as well, and that whole cycle. I didn't think I could achieve that working abroad, and although there are other people who will give that example, and I think there are, as we grow, I expect to be in different regions to be working. But I think the third point really for us is you look at the world and you look at what's going on a planet. A short supply chain is a great thing to have. Us being an hour down the road from our manufacturer on our first product that we're taking to market, it seems like a great option to have that support and network. We know that we're paying a premium for that. However, the quality that we have and the ability to go up the road and kind of deal with that I don't have to go through 3 months quarantining or get stuck in someplace to do that is a real benefit when you're talking about speed. And then when we scale that through and as we progress through with partners, we do want to support as local as we can. So there's a whole host of reasons, but hopefully that covers a little bit of my thinking, I suppose.
Great.
It certainly
Thanks,
does.
Adam. Just one last question before we move on to general questions. Microplastics. I mean, the scale of the problem is huge, which you sort of alluded to, and the change that's going to happen in the way that we understand and perceive. I mean, it's actually been great that there's been so much publicity in the last couple of weeks about the pollution that we have in our rivers and all the rest of it, and how Britain is actually one of the worst offenders in Europe.
100%.
In terms of pollution. So there's a huge change that's going to happen there. But I mean, the legislation is really, really important, isn't it? And it's going to make a huge difference to the way that people perceive the problem and the challenges. So that's one question.
Yeah, sure.
The other question was, it's really interesting how, as the British Design Fund, when we first encounter people, we often invest in what we believe is one thing, and then it turns out to be something completely different. And in a way, that was the case with Adam and Matter, in that Gulp was the product that we first saw and it really sort of invested in. But the way that the business has evolved and changed, it's become a much bigger thing. And Adam, it's probably fair to say that a significant amount of your time now is spent with manufacturers thinking about how you can retrofit the technology that you have into their machines. So it's fascinating how things change.
Yes, I'll cover that. I think, thank you so much, John. I mean, you guys have been a part of our journey, and Damon as well have been incredible help for us and the whole team. I think in regards to the scale of this issue, maybe I probably glanced over that, but effectively a standard washing machine, if you just use washing machines in a domestic application, we're not talking about commercial applications, we're not talking about textiles, manufacturing, just in your home right now, you'll be doing, say, 4 washes a week as an average is pretty normal. If you've got kids, you might be 3 washes a day, but just go with something in the region around 4 washes a week, right? We see about 1 gram of microplastic release per wash. There are 24 million washing machines just in the UK every single day washing their stuff. So that's somewhere between 14 and 16 tons of this material that I just showed you down here that's being released into a water system that is designed to capture at its best particles down to 6 millimeters in size. Microplastic starts in our eyes between 5 millimeters and 1 micron. the system is not designed for it. And even if it was designed for it, the wastewater treatment plants that we have built in the UK, as you mentioned, John, are what they refer to as combined sewage. They take the rainwater and the household sewage and they combine them, because we have a Victorian system mostly, and they put them together down the pipe. Now, in Bristol, there's 266 million litres of water a day go through a wastewater treatment plant in Bristol. That serves about 1.2 million people. Now, in a dry weather scenario, which is when it doesn't rain, they have a permit to do that 266 million litres. Now, in a wet weather scenario, it's 7 times that amount of water that they see. And that 7 times amount of water, they bypass. That water goes straight out and goes into the rivers and it gets dumped. And this is why I'm sure, Sam, you have experience of this, where they close the beaches because it smells a bit funky. And that's because they're pouring pharmaceuticals, they're pouring microplastics, they're producing, and also they're taking industrial waste. These guys are buying industrial waste and injecting. I've been to the facilities and seeing them injecting antifreeze production chemicals into the water, and they just dilute it down enough that they can pass the regulations. They're not treating it, they're just diluting it. And that is currently going through our wastewater treatment plants, it's going in our rivers, and funnily enough, it's going in our food. So this issue is, the consumer awareness is there, the markets are saying they want a solution, you've got regulatory moving, it's a pinch point, and infrastructure, we need drastic revision in infrastructure. And as we see this happening throughout the world, I mean, the solutions that we're doing, the reason why this is exciting, this wastewater treatment plant solution, is because they normally take like 26 hours to filter water, which is why they bypass a lot of water, because it has to basically settle and they wait a period of time for it to settle. This can do that in minutes. So our capacity, we move from static filtration to dynamic filtration. It completely changes the game for them. So opportunities there, time is there for that. And then the second question, I think, was talking about how we've diversified as a business, John. I don't want to hog the stage with this, but yeah, I mean, we're as a business, really, I mean, I set out as a single product kind of company. We were looking at Gulp. It was sort of a D2C led business and a product, much like Sam, found a problem, thinking about that solution, thinking about how you get there. And I think we've iterated through that process, and it became really clear that the best way to scale is partnership. And that's where we've done what we refer to as the Matter Inside program. It's taking our technology and copying the Intel Inside model, about putting a little sparkle of magic in there to make sure you can kind of grow that through. Mix that with the industrial piece and the materials piece as well that we have going on. We're pretty busy. So maybe that gives you a bit of a flavour about us.
Super, thank you. John, over to you.
Incredible stories. I mean, first things first, thank you for sharing such incredible detail on the progress that you've both made. I have so many questions about what you're doing and how you're doing it, but I wanted to sort of take it all the way back to the manufacturing ethos, if you like, and perhaps start with, before we get to the questions from our guests, is to perhaps unpick the story of were there any moments when you thought, well, no, I'd rather make this overseas, because you faced that challenge of cost. You both said that it wasn't easy to make something in this country. How hard was it? I don't mind who answers first, but were the sort of fundamental challenges to keeping the manufacturing in this country?
Sam?
Oh, sorry, Adam.
No, I was going to say, do you want to go?
Right, for us, it would have been much harder to make the product overseas, because we had certain levels of control that we needed. We were still evolving the products. We are a co-design company. Yeah. We do work with women. We listen to their voices and we hear what they say, and we reflect that in our design work. And we offer, because we have all our technology and our engineers in house, I should just say, for scale, we don't have a massive, great big office like Adam. We have a shed in Cornwall. We're literally, our team is a team of 2, and we work both on different sheds in different parts of, very near to each other, but very close by to the two. Very close by, but in small home home office environments, but we're still manufacturing in the UK in small home office environments and small workshops.
Yeah.
And that's how we're managing to do it. And actually to do what we do, to listen to our customers, to be as dynamic as we can be, to meet their needs when their needs are presented to us, and then to respond to things like the environmental crisis. We just couldn't do that. If we mass produce in China, we just couldn't do that. And we wouldn't have been able to afford to either. We don't have massive amounts of revenue. We're quite new. We don't have those big partnerships yet, although they are coming for us. Our product was so radical that for a really long time, it was very hard to communicate for a long time, because people would just say that oh, it doesn't look like a breast, people won't buy it, it doesn't look like anything that exists already, because it doesn't. It's radically new design. But we've proven that is really needed by the customers, and it was co-designed in the beginning with our customers, but there was a lot of barriers that we had to getting it off the ground originally, where people just didn't understand the product or didn't see the market potential, because they didn't know those women and what they needed, and they weren't listening to their voices. So all of that made like the investment into to go to a large manufacturer overseas and commit to thousands of units. We just weren't actually in that space. So there was a variety of factors that influenced the way that we manufacture now. And what we've done is definitely, I feel, the best way for us to retain that co-design, retain that relationship with our customer, and to adapt to what they need.
And just a point on the pod manufacturing system that you've developed, that's become a fundamental part of the business, I take it. It's not just about making the product, but you've actually designed a way to make the product so that you can socialize the manufacturing of it in other countries, reducing carbon footprint, so that they're made here for the appropriate market here within a certain distance or radius of your factory, but they could be made using your pod system of manufacturing, which I think is a really interesting approach.
And again, we don't have a factory. There are two. So Boost is a team of two. We have two interns, and then who help with various bits of work that we do. We have two interns, and we have two staff. And so, you know, we're manufacturing, we're selling hundreds of units a month now. You know, we're direct to customer, we're doing really well, but we're doing what we're doing because we can do it in the UK and we have ownership of that. It is surprising what you can do with very little money and very little space. We don't have, like I said, we don't have a factory. What we have is one production pod at the moment. We're scaling that up, or we're seeking to scale up. We are working from home essentially, but we're still running a manufacturing business in the UK.
Well, I'm really pleased that you are, because Made in Britain is all about the future of British manufacturing. And if the future looks like this, a sort of completely different approach actually to manufacturing, rather than approaching an agent in another country and saying, can you find me 1,000 of these, please? No. You're actually organically growing a manufacturing community in your village, from what you said.
Yes,
Adam,
from the village. Yeah.
Adam, tell us a little bit about the Gulp device, because I mean, one question I had, being from a TV home shopping background in the distant past, I'm curious as to whether the machine is already available for sale, or whether it's about to become on sale, or how do people get access to it, because clearly there's a need for us all to buy these. But the other question around the machine was that how big a decision was it to make a sophisticated machine like that? I take it it's got a plug, or it's got an electric system to get into it. You know, most of those things are made in other countries these days, aren't they? I was at the Spring Fair recently, and trying to find somebody that makes something with a plug on it in this country is really hard. How hard was it for you?
Yeah, I think firstly, the first question, you go to gulp.online, you'll be able to see this product online. We did a Kickstarter recently, and we were top 4% Kickstarters of all time. We're now doing a follow-on with Indiegogo, so if you want to pre-order one, you can do. Great. They're coming out later this year, so please check that out. Thank you, John, for mentioning that. Supply chain, building a supply chain in the UK, what does that look like, everything else in between? I mean, it would be pretty ignorant to kind of think that China and the Far East are not a massive part of the manufacturing supply chain.
Yeah.
And I think we're pretty clear to understand exactly what that looks like. We'd like to detach ourselves entirely, but the reality is that, so I'm molding in the UK, I'm assembling in the UK.
Yeah.
I'm also producing PCBs in the UK.
Goodness,
and
that isn't easy.
So I'm producing my PCBs here. Our pumps, I think there's a couple of components that we're going to struggle to get out that aren't going to come out of Shenzhen.
Yeah.
And I think there's some discussions about that. And we've tried a few different, but the other thing as well that we must kind of talk about is, you know, if you want to be competitive, it's about that cost perspective as well. We talked about that. I think it's an interesting thing to talk about true cost, because, you know, we had the tooling quote that we had one tooling quote that said it was a third of the price of what we have tooled for, and we didn't really. One of our in-house legal, David, did 25 years in the Navy. He speaks Mandarin. He's an interesting character, and he's just sort of like, I know where that factory is. I know I wouldn't go there at night. I wouldn't buy from these people. And he was giving us a rundown of exactly what areas we were looking at. The head of Gulp program, he's produced a product before, used Shenzhen, used China. There's the challenges that you face when you start, in my eyes, there's a lot there that you have to conquer, and being on the ground, you have that language barrier. Then one of the things that we try not to talk about, but the reality is there's an IP risk, and the IP risk for us is monumental. If we have 10,000 units going out the front door, 5,000 units going out the back door, that is a very different proposition from what I'm trying to sell. So I think all of these make the decisions, all of these parts, and I've been very prominent and a strong voice in kind of in the business, and saying, you know, I want to keep it on the UK, and we've had a lot of there's some great manufacturing around the world, and I don't think it will stay in the UK forever. We're working in the States a lot. It makes sense to have a local supply chain for the States. It makes sense to have a local supply chain if we're moving into Australia. Is going to be a massive market for us. I don't shipping things around the world. If I can keep my supply chain short, we will do. But I think there's you need to have this kind of financial benefit decision as well, which has to include what I would refer to as true cost. That's people, planet, profit. You know, you've got to be thinking about all of those three things. We're a B Corp as a business, so if I'm not looking at people and planet, I'm not fulfilling my directorship duties, and I can be held accountable for that.
Yeah, values are changing, aren't they? And I think people, you know, when they look at the price of something now, I think people are actually thinking as much about the non-monetary values of things, especially things that are essentially cleaning up a problem that we've all created for ourselves. You know, the value to that in the environment and to affecting the food that we eat, ultimately, I think is very hard to measure. You certainly don't measure it in pounds, shillings, and pence, as they used to say.
Yeah, I think, and you know, we work. I've got two customers in Chicago, and we go to their facility, and it's one of they're a 150-year-old business. They've got a manufacturing facility that is probably a 10-minute bike ride across it, right? To give you appreciation.
Yeah.
They're unionized, right? So they have a very different approach to the way they manufacture things, and they have a real challenge with trying to get people in for the younger generation to fill those manufacturing roles. And they have an issue on their scale side. But you walk around the facilities, there's huge, great big US flags hanging from the building, and they're very proud of the built in the US, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we also work with German companies, and again, that company owns their own foundry. These guys are old school manufacturing. I don't even know there's many foundries left in the UK. You know, and I think the supply chain stuff that we have to see that support from the government wanting to do this. This is a huge part of our GDP. Like the position that we have, I think it needs to be encouraged. So the Made in Britain program, I think, is fantastic, and I think DIT also is going to have to dramatically step up. because as a small business, us having to, the idea of deregulation sounds lovely, but it just means I've got to now work in 2 regulatory markets. I'm going to be selling in Europe. I'm also going to be selling in the UK. So I now have 2 sets of standards rather than I had 1.
Yeah.
So the challenges that are being put in place for us as a business, they need to be supported by losing Horizon 2020 funding. Like the Innovate UK stuff has been very good to us. However, there's a lot more in there that gap needs to be filled. So I think the UK manufacturing scene has an opportunity right now, because people want to, with what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in China and Taiwan, people want to de-risk their manufacturing. The opportunity is here. This now needs to be followed on with a long-term strategic plan. It's not a 4-year cycle, and it needs to think about what this looks like for the future of our country, and how do we support local people and local jobs, and at the same time provide a sustainable growth, looking at the way that we produce and the products, and how to be comparative.
Well, you make a really good point, and certainly there is a cross-party and cross-trade body organisation belief that we desperately need an industrial strategy for the country to get behind, but including a manufacturing sector on that. And I personally feel that manufacturing should be singled out differently, because the risks are so high to setting up a manufacturing business. You know, the risks, the rewards tend to be different, let's say, much sort of more towards slower growth than fast growth. And I think that has to be recognised by government and all of the trade bodies that are working towards trying to grow British manufacturing and increase the quality and depth and breadth of the British supply chains. John, I'm conscious of time and thinking that we really need to get some interaction going with our guests. There's only one of our guests that has come. Simon, you're in Vision. I wonder if you'd like to make any contribution. Tell us who you are and perhaps why you've joined us this morning.
I'm a chartered accountant, but I work with innovators, and it's my strong belief that we should be making goods in the UK, in Britain, wherever possible. I realise that's not entirely possible at the moment with supply chains that are set up at the moment. I've previously been involved in the fragrance industry. Products have been sourced from all over the world, to be honest. Italy, China, glass tends from China, pumps come from Italy, fragrance comes from France and the UK, and then it's been filled in the UK. So I've always tried to make products in the UK, but compliant with the EU regulations, which is what I will continue to do in FTA regulations. Yeah. At the moment, I'm working with a company called Harry Brew, who are a very innovative company that have a product that is in the sounds home brew, which sounds like man in shed, but that's the whole point. It takes the man in shed away.
You can do a lot in a shed, can't you, Simon?
Well, it takes it away from the shed and brings it into the kitchen. And basically, we've presented to the Home Shopping Network in the States, and they are very interested in taking it, though we will need some support. So I wanted to see how you approach things, how the other people, Sam and Adam, had found the experience of working with you, and maybe we've already presented to Sam Kramer, who said personally buy one of these products. But so at some point in time, we'd like to connect with you and see whether there's an opportunity to do something with you.
Well, perhaps John, you could explain how the British Design Fund works. You know, the sort of, you know, the nuts and bolts of it, really.
Yeah. Well, it is an amazing design, and that will be very helpful. Yeah.
Sure. Well, the British Design, I mean, essentially we're looking for, as I said, well-designed, purpose-led products. I mean, we've sort of taken the decision not to really get too involved in B2C products directly. It's not where our expertise lies. So the sort of product, you know, the sort of products that Adam and Sam have described are the sort of areas that we're pretty keen on. And we have our problem, in a sense, the British Design Fund is we're middlemen. We attract people who want to invest money in great British manufacturing. And we're finding actually increasingly that that's happening more and more, as I think people are getting worried about technology. So, you know, we're now working with John Rose, Sir John Rose, who's the ex-CEO of Rolls-Royce, who is, huge contacts all around the place, and he's bringing loads of people who are interested in investing. And then what we do is we marry that money with the sort of people that come to us through all sorts of areas that have businesses that want to be invested, that need to be invested in, and they come from all over the place. We do a lot of work with universities. We do a lot of work with trade associations and bodies like yours, John. What we don't find is that we have any issue with getting lots of people interested in coming to us, because there just isn't there isn't. Genuinely, I think we are the only fund that still has manufacturing as a focus. I don't think there's anyone else out there that has the same sort of focus. So we have a very simple process. Hundreds of people come to us. We have to filter it down. We then have an investment committee. It's a bit like Dragon's Den, but I hate Dragon's Den. So I'll just tell you that. I absolutely hate it. My wife won't let me watch it with her because I get so furious. I shout at the television.
I did once tell John that I would go on Dragon's Den as a joke, just to make him cross.
I share your feelings, John. Actually, I share your feelings on that.
Actually, as my wife says, it's television. Understand, it's television.
It's not real business as such.
Business. So
Adam and Samantha.
So unfortunately, it's quite a focus. We focus down.
Yeah.
But we get there in the end.
Simon, you got a question? Sorry.
I just wanted to come back on that because I see Sam's product and Adam's products actually as consumer products anyway, and ours is a consumer product, and there's no question about it. And if you're not focusing on consumer products, albeit you have done with Sam and Adams, then who would do? Because if we present a great British design that has the possibilities of creating fantastic exports and creating jobs, and if you're not going to get behind that because you don't touch consumer products, then who would do in the country?
Well, so I'm not saying no. I'm absolutely not saying no, and I haven't actually. I don't know what you do, and
you don't have to. It's a principle, really. But what I'm saying is, if we're making something in Britain that we can export and create jobs in the UK,
so we'd be very open to hearing from you, Simon, about what you do and where you want funding and help.
Do you touch medical devices as well, just as another aside?
Sorry?
You do anything in medical, or is that?
Yeah, we do. Yes, we do. Have a look at our website. Simon. You'll see the sort of range of products that we actually support.
I just wonder, John, whether there's...
I'll just say one last thing. I mean, we have an investment committee. I chair that investment committee, but we have a range of people who are involved in that, and we listen to their experience of the different markets that we're looking at, and we have to make decisions around the strength of the company, the strength of the individuals that we're talking to. Often, actually, interestingly, Simon, one of the things that we found over the years that it's an ability to be able to work with people who will listen to your advice, and we feel there's no point in us investing in somebody if all they're going to do is walk away and take the money and not actually listen and work with us. So it's a combination of things. It's a really interesting mix.
100%.
Let's talk.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I wanted to just put some, I'm always fearful that we're using acronyms and phrases that perhaps some people might not be familiar with. But I wanted to just circle back onto the consumer funding, or B2C and B2B, obviously business to business or business to consumer, and whether part of what you don't fund is FMCG, the fast moving consumer goods that people would typically find in a supermarket, because I don't think certainly in Samantha's and Adam's case, they're not FMCG products. No. And probably never will be. Is it a definition around not B2C but B2 supermarket, let's say?
Yes, you're probably right, John. It's fast moving consumer goods that we're probably not best aligned to. You know, and it's about using the expertise of the mentors that we've got,
yeah,
and the skill sets that we have as individuals as well. And you know, there are many funds around that will actually support fast-moving consumer good products, food and drink products, the like of.
And just for definition, Simon, is your product got so that we can potentially have a look at it? Is there already somewhere public that we can see it?
Sam Kramer has seen it already. He's in your team, isn't he?
He's in the British Design Fund team, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so somebody out there
linked with you guys. Is that linked with yourselves?
I'll check separately, Simon.
Sorry.
Great. We can.
Oh, you were linked. Excuse my ignorance.
And it just for clarity, it's a home brew system, is it?
It is, for wine or beer. Yes,
a home brew system.
Alcohol is involved, but it's completely. It just changes the process. It's a process simplification that makes it a kitchen aesthetic, like an espresso machine. It's an espresso machine for wine.
That sounds really interesting.
So we will be delighted if it was an FMCG. I'll be honest with you.
I could do with one of those in my home office, Simon. If you want to, you know, someone
an espresso machine for wine.
We want to be. It does take a week. You can't put it in 2 minutes.
Okay.
30 seconds later, it does take a week to process.
Did you wait that long, Sam?
No, I don't know. Well, you know, depends what kind of day we've had.
It does tick various ESG boxes because it obviously reduces the amount of people that. I mean, people bought 1 billion bottles of. In the UK of wine, believe it, in the UK.
Yeah, well, these statistics on what we're wasting and the amount of litter we're creating are really important. It goes back to the point about value.
Yeah, it would significantly tick a few ESG boxes, but obviously, you know, with alcohol, you always have to be careful and you have to be responsible. So we understand that.
Adam, I'm conscious that you had your hand up a couple of times. Wanted to say something.
Yeah,
if you can remember what it was, please do, darling.
Sure. Yeah, I was only going to mention about a little bit about funding because we've been through a journey, and I think you know, I mentioned we kind of started from quite humble beginnings. I thought maybe it'd be worth just mentioning that. I think I've learned a lot about how to fundraise. We're currently raising. We have a deal on the table for about $10 million is what we're looking at raising now. So we've gone through quite a bit of a journey.
From 250 quid to $10 million. Well done, Adam.
Well, I'll wait until the money's in the bank before I celebrate anything at all. I've had a few of these before as well. So
it's all about the journey.
I kind of wanted to mention, Simon. I mean, one of the things that we've had was Innovate UK do an innovation loan, which has been useful for us. We've used that for some of our tooling. I went from £250. The next one I won was Young Innovator of the Year Award, which is a £5,000 grant. I then won £140,000 through an Innovate UK call. So there's an opportunity, depending on TRL levels, the technology readiness levels that you're at and the stage you're at. That was a development for us. And then once we were at that stage, John and the team and some other investors we had, Sky were one of the early investors in the business with us. As a corporate CVC, corporate venture capital. Sorry to use the acronyms. I'll try not to, John. So that was a real partnership and alignment. So I think depending on your application and where you want to go, and the other thing I think is really important is to discuss like bootstrapping bootstrapping is a great place to be in many ways. And I think it depends, like hardware is hard and you do require significant capital for manufacturing and setup. But, you know, just thinking back to James Dyson's story, you know, his approach and the way that he went through, the first thing he did was he did a license for around £600,000. God, that must have been like in the 90s, I think.
Yeah.
And then from the money from that set up his production line. He doesn't have any shareholders apart from, I mean, he's pretty much, I'm sure it's pretty much 100% funded by his own family. So there are lots of different stages and there are lots of different people that are looking at that. So EIS funds, the tax efficient ways of funding, and SCIS, depending on the stage you're at, I think there's a whole host of stuff. And one of the best things that we ever did as a business was NatWest Accelerator, which is free and it's available to other people as well. I would check that out, because they can also help a lot with funding, fundraising strategy, and they can help make sure that you're talking to, if you should be talking to angels and actually you want to be talking to VCs, or it's a whole host of fun stuff. So
yeah, I would imagine that's part of the network that you're in, isn't it, John, on the British Design Fund, is that you're able to connect people as well, you know, via sort of an ecosystem of people who care about the growth of British manufacturing and about how design impacts that.
Yeah, no, we're pretty well connected, and so we know an awful lot of people who can help. And it's quite. I'm on a slightly different tack. I'm very involved in the healthy aging market at the moment, and in fact, I was talking to a bunch of people this morning, and to me, Innovate UK has done a huge amount to really get people like Adam, and I mean, it's remarkable how many people that come and present. Yeah, exactly.
We've been funded by Innovate UK now. We're on our 4th fund.
Well, it's remarkable how many people come through our system that actually have had Innovate UK grants. So I mean, we are very good as a country at helping to get people off the ground and get started and get things going. We may not be quite as, and I don't want to turn this into a different
different topic. That's a webinar for another day.
But we may not be as good as we could be at following that up with supporting industries as they grow to the next stage.
It's also about inclusivity for me, like, because I'm not, obviously, it might be obvious, it might not be, but to me, I'm not from an engineering background. I've never had the chance to work with the team at Dyson. I wouldn't have ever have come into this kind of thing, which means that when I look at what I want to do in terms of manufacturing, and when I've talked to engineers, quite often, because of the way that I have planned things and want to do it very, very differently to industry norms, with our pod manufacturing in particular, we found there was lots of pushback from people who were going, oh, well, you can't actually do that. You must go into production molding. You must go to China. Otherwise, you can't maximize your profits, and you must do this and you must do that. And one of the things that I've been really conscious of is that actually to bring people through who can aspire to be manufacturing leaders of the future, to have diverse viewpoints is really important. And I do feel quite passionately that gets lost sometimes in the systematic structures that we have, where people who have different ways of viewing their manufacturing and how they might run their business might actually get lost a little bit in the industry norms. So one of the things that I do a lot with Innovate UK is work on the inclusivity side, look at how we can aspire new people into, or inspire and help them aspire to be manufacturers of the future, or to keep hold of what the values of their company are. Like Adam and I've both spoken about that. Our core values are so important, and those have reflected in the way that we're manufacturing and what the decision making is in the process. But actually,
I think that's a really good place to wrap up. I'm conscious of the time. I'm worried they'll kick us out of the digital room. So I think we'll have to save the question for another time, Simon. I just want to make one observation. Just a very quick comment at the end.
John, you just mentioned about the healthy aging. I'm actually working with 3 companies. The other 2 companies work on dysphasia, and they're seeking funding at the moment, which is swallowing difficulty. And it's
Simon, why don't we have a chat separately? Why don't you send me you'll find me on LinkedIn, drop me a line, and we'll set up a conversation. John, can I just thank Adam and Sam hugely?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
What was a really interesting discussion, and a really useful discussion.
Yeah,
John,
and I think we've got some real pioneers here that are leading the way. Manufacturing in this country has to grow. We do need to make more things closer to where they're needed, and that's exactly what they're doing, and working in two fields that I think are going to be very important to the British economy going forward. So I celebrate and congratulate what you're doing, and hope that we can organise another event like this in the future. I know we're in a long-term relationship with the British Design Fund, because we care about this as much as you do. But I want to add to John's words of thanks for you both, Adam and Samantha, and also to Simon for joining in Vision with the discussion. I hope Nick, Barry, John and Ian have enjoyed what they've heard, and we've got your comment there, Nick, about how much cheaper it is to manufacture in this country if you look at the absolute net cost of it, and that's appreciated. All that remains for me to do is to thank everyone for joining us this morning. We've had a really interesting discussion that is ongoing, and we're in a relationship that is of growth for the British manufacturing communities, and obviously the British Design Fund is part of that growth story. And we look forward to seeing how you get on, and I'm going off to see where your products are sold so that I can start promoting that on social media and elsewhere as well. So thanks very much. I'm wishing you all a lovely day, and hope to see you again soon.